welcome to another great edition of Mississippi Stories. I'm your host, Marshall Ramsey. I'm the editor at large and editorial cartoonist for Mississippi Today. If you want to see any past episodes of Mississippi Stories, you can go to MississippiToday.org, or you can check out our YouTube channel as well. Like us, that'd be great. We'd love for you to check out some of our other content as well. Great reporting, great cartoons. Got to love Mississippi Today. And you got to love our guests today as well. And, you know, one of the joys of traveling around Mississippi and speaking and getting to go to different events and getting to meet people is that you run into other speakers who are just fascinating and got great stories. And our guest today is somebody that I ran into a few years ago, but I've gotten to know a little bit better over the last, couple of years. We're actually in the same speaking group, which is kind of neat too. But we've got Janie Walters with us today. She lives in the Jackson area, but she's from the Gulf Coast. I guess originally she taught down there for a while in Gulfport. You were at Gulfport High School from 1971 to 1980 teaching. We'll break all this down, Janie, but you are a professional speaker. I love that. And you're a corporate trainer as well. You started doing this. I'm trying to think, I guess you've been doing this over 20 years now as your gig and as your job. And you are amazing. You're one of the best speakers that I've heard speak. And so that's why I just am excited that you're here with us today. And I wanted to say hello and thank you for joining us.
And thank you for inviting me. I have been looking forward to it ever since you mentioned it. So thanks for having me on your program. I feel like I really am in the presence of greatness, Marshall. You realize you are nationally known and a Mississippi treasure. So I am honored to be on your show.
Yeah, when you say the Mississippi treasure, it always reminds me of that great Rodney Dangerfield joke when he said he was born and his mother said, "Oh, he's a treasure," and his dad said, "Oh, let's bury him." So I always think of that. But thank you. Those are incredibly kind words. And, you know, I love that 75% of people in this country suffer from glossophobia, which most people don't know what that is, but that is the fear of public speaking. And, obviously that has never been something that's really bothered you because, I mean, you look at your background, whether it's in speech or it's in communications, or if it's whether you're acting or you're on stage talking. When did you really discover that you love to just get up in front of people and tell them stories?
Well, it went all the way back to high school. I mean, and I'm having to really dig back there to get to high school. But when I was in high school, I was put in a group that was asked to write a play. It was an advanced English class thing, and we had to write the play. And then once we wrote it, we had to be actors and actresses in it. And that was my first taste. And then, if you want to hear the second part of high school, my government teacher said that the American Legion Oratorical Contest was coming up, and she needed 3 volunteers to compete for that contest. And none of us volunteered. So she volunteered 3 of us. And we had to memorize an 8 to 10 minute memorized speech about the Constitution that we wrote. And then we had to bone up on 6 of the different articles in order to speak impromptu on those should they pick them. And so I worked real hard, and luckily and thankfully I won the school competition. And then from the school competition, I went on to win the district competition. And then I went on to win the regional competition. And then I wound up as the Southern competitor in the state competition. And there should have been, if you want to hear the rest of this story, there should have been only 2 of us in the state, the one from the South and the one from the North. But there were actually 3 people, because there was a girl there from Mexico City, Mexico.
Yeah.
Girl Scouts on Mexico City, Mexico. And she spoke Spanish. I mean, we didn't know a single word she said. And so she stood up and spoke, and she had brought her principal and her family and relatives and all kinds of dignitaries from Mexico with her. And there was just such a huge commotion. Then I got up to speak, and I got started with my memorized presentation. And I was so distracted by all of that right in the middle of it, I had to say, well, that's about all I can remember of that, and sat down. And needless to say, I did not win the state competition. But all of that was enough to make me know that I really liked doing that.
So when you went to college, you went to, of course, USM, Southern Miss, you got to love it. What made you decide to go into speech education? I mean, was that you said, okay, I want to really be part of the speaking scene, but I also want to help others learn to be able to speak better. I mean, that would be my guess, right?
Yeah. Well, you're getting started in the right direction, but needless to say, it's more convoluted than that. So in my freshman year, I took a speech class, and I made an A+ on all of my speeches. And the teacher was very, very complimentary. And I got the kind of compliments that other people did not, which made me think, well, Janie, this might be something you're really good at. But I'm not mean to be tooting my horn. I'm like so many other people in the world, just like you, Marshall. I have many interests and many talents, and I can play the, oh dear, hush. I'm sorry. Hold on just a second. Let me go get this one. She won't stop with hush. She will insist on getting another treat, and I've already given her 2 big treats. And so this is Venice. Venice, say hello. Venice is 12 years old. She's an Italian greyhound, and she's persnickety and not obedient. And so I'm real sorry. She's a lover, but she's not obedient. So to continue my story, when I left Jones County Junior College, where I got my undergraduate, I went to USM, and I was assigned a counselor to help me pick a major. And he said, his name was Dr. Everett, and he said, now, Janie, what is it that you would like to do with your life? What would you like to major in? And I said, well, I love singing, and so I'd love to major in music, perhaps, but I seem to be pretty good at speaking. And then I want to be a missionary, and I love being in the Baptist Student Union. And I worked with the mentally retarded at the Ellisville State School for the mentally retarded. So I wouldn't mind being in special education. Are you getting this picture? And so Dr. Everett said, well, Janie, he was the chairman of the speech communication department. He said, well, let me just go ahead and enter you in speech education. And then you can change at any point to go any other, but I've got to get you registered in something. And I said, okay, that sounds good. So he lined up my courses in speech ed, and I absolutely loved them and never changed. And so that's why I stayed with speech in college.
You know, it's funny, Janie, I was thinking back to my college experience, and I used to be terrified just getting up in front of people and talking. I mean, I always chose to go first just to get out of the way, you know, because it was terrifying. But my sophomore year, I had a speech teacher who said, go interview somebody who does what you want to do for a living. So I walked down to the newspaper and met the editorial cartoonist. And of course, he's still my mentor at 90 years old. So, or actually he's 91 now, Charlie is. And then my second speech teacher, I got a 95 on the first test, and she looked at me and she said, you can do better than that. And it was just like, and it was really, for me, it was nerve wracking because I'm trying to think about 15 years later after college, I was at the University of Tennessee speaking, and she was sitting in the audience with a notebook taking notes at my performance. And I was just like, she was grading me 15 years after I graduated. I was like, stop it. That's terrible. But I was able to say thank you to her for that. And it's funny how these professors will do that and will give you a little bit of a push or a little bit of a shove. And, you know, you did end up going into teaching. And I mean, you were down at Gulfport for a long time. Where are you from originally?
Grew up in the little town called Ellisville. It's between Laurel and Hattiesburg in South Mississippi. It's a small town, but it was just like Mayberry. I had the best time growing up there. Everybody in town knows you, and you go to church and school with all the same people, and you're with them from elementary to junior high to high school, you know, that sort of thing. And so it was just a wonderful way, and you couldn't get in trouble anywhere because somebody would know you and report back to your mother. So Ellisville was a fabulous place to grow up.
Yeah, the free state of Jones.
But the free state of Jones, you're exactly right.
Well,
and then when I got
up on the coast,
well, when I got out of college, and this is sort of one of those God stories I love to tell. So I got my master's at USM because when I was graduating with my speech ed degree, they came and said, Janie, would you be willing to do teaching for us and teach some of the speech classes, and we'll pay for your master's program. And I thought that was a great idea. So I had a teaching fellowship to get my master's degree, and that was great. Well, I happened to be in a debate course in my master's program, and the debate teacher at Gulfport East High School was in that course getting his master's, and we were paired for a debate. Now, I'd never debated. My high school didn't have debate. None of my speech classes had anything about debate in them. And so when I wound up in this master's course with this coach for a debate team, I got paired with him. And needless to say, I was terrified. But I did my research because I knew I was going to have to step it up if I was going to have a chance to beat him in the debate. And lo and behold, I did. I was able, all the class and the instructor said that I won that particular debate. And he was so delighted that he recommended me to the principal to take his place when he left. So I left college and stepped right into Gulfport East High School teaching speech and debate in a course called humanities. It was funny when the principal told me that I was going to be teaching speech and debate and humanities. I said, well, the first two sound fabulous, but I've got to be honest with you. I don't even know what humanities is. How do you go about teaching it? And so that was an education in itself, but it was good. It was a great start.
When you teach, you think about teaching in 1970 and now when you're out speaking before an audience and the attention spans are so much different now than they were back and back even 10, 15 years ago before iPhones, I guess, came out and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that. When you're up in front of an audience and you want to keep them engaged and you don't want, to me, the death is when you see them, when you start seeing people doing this, you're like,
or looking at their watches, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in big trouble on that. What is kind of a secret when because what you're doing now, you're still educating. You're an educator. You just educate a different audience. You're not doing students per se, but you're whoever you're entertaining. What's a way for you to be able to keep their attention?
Well, I think variety is the spice of life. And I don't know if you've noticed when you've seen me speak, I don't use PowerPoint.
Right.
I tell people I am your point of power. Pay close attention. And so I'm one of the relics still out there who just depends upon engaging an audience. And so I do it with using humor and lots of jokes, and then I will engage them by asking questions and interacting with them. And I love to get audiences up doing things, clapping hands, playing games, turning around, shaking hands, doing something. And so I don't really have what you'd call a formula, but every paragraph or so in my notes, there's a joke. Every other paragraph, there'll be a joke. And then after about 10, 15 minutes, there'll be an interaction of some kind. Once or twice in a 30-minute presentation, I'll have them up doing something or turning around or playing some kind of game. And so it's just keeping the audience engaged in your material that I have found to be the secret. And I have a few things that I do that's unique, and it's so wonderful that people introduce me as the humorist oftentimes, and I don't see myself as a humorist at all. I'm a motivational speaker, and I bring quality material that if you'll pay attention to, you can actually improve your life. But because it's fun, whether I'm telling jokes or we're up doing fun things, because it's fun, they think, oh, here comes the fun lady. And so I don't mind being known for that. I sign my signatures, joyfully yours, Janie, on all of my business letters. And my email address is joyfully Janie. And so I'm just saying, I don't mind being known for joy, and I don't mind them thinking of me as a humorist, but I know I'm a speaker and a teacher.
You are a speaker and a teacher, and you've been speaking, like I said, for a long time. You threw out, was it 1984? It was that you started doing this professionally. So you've been doing this a long time. I was in high school.
No, some of the people I talked to weren't even born when I got started. That's true. Now, I was not, I was still teaching. I was not full-time motivational speaker in 1984. Okay. I continued to teach. And then people would call and ask me to speak, and I would do that. And then I'd go and I'd find myself taking personal leave and using my summers and using holiday breaks and skipping classes and all kinds of things to get these speeches. And finally, in 2000, when my husband moved us from Gulfport up to Madison for a job change that he had, I went ahead and seized that opportunity to retire from school teaching so that I could go full-time with my business. So I've only been a full-time motivational speaker and training since 2000.
Only since 2000. It's wonderful. Like I said, I've gotten to hear you out in the wild, and I like to tell people that you remind me very much of Zig Ziglar, which is, I think, a very nice compliment, because of course he's Zig Ziglar from Yazoo City originally, and since left us, but was absolutely a fantastic motivational speaker. When you got started, how did you come up with your material? Because it's hard to stand up in front of people for 30 minutes or an hour or whenever, how long you need to speak in front of them, and to continue to just keep giving them the little bits and information that they need. And tell us a little bit about some of the things that you talk about.
Okay. Well, the very first time that I was asked to speak, I was still at the high school, and I had spoken at a conference where teachers were. And at that conference, and the first thing that I talked about was the importance of having fun in the classroom. That was the teacher thing. And so I was telling them of all the things that I did to have fun in my classrooms. And from there, several teachers started asking me to come. And one group in particular, a group of teachers who taught cosmetology, started wanting me to come. And they would say, Janie, we've already heard your humor presentation. What else do you have? And I said, well, what else do you need to learn? And so are here. And that's how they actually got started. But sometimes I'd read books and get inspired to write a speech. Sometimes people would just say, we need to hear something about so-and-so.
Yeah.
We need something on teamwork. Or Janie, we've got so much conflict. Is there anything you can do about neutralizing negatives? And just things like that, and off I went. Did that answer your question?
It did, actually.
Sure.
I asked you a big long question just so I could sit here and listen to you. So I guess the reason I asked that, number one, I mean, I've got a list of all the different things that you talk about, and it's amazing. I'm going to pull it up here. Hang on, I've got a bunch of lists. There we go. So I mean, you do blow a bubble, not a gasket. You got the garbage truck comes on Tuesdays and Fridays. Normal is gone and it won't come back. I tell you what, I mean, I could read through all these, but let's touch on normal is gone and won't come back, because you did an absolutely incredibly powerful presentation on resilience the other day. And right now, if there was ever a time we need to hear about resilience, it would be in the middle of a pandemic. That was just incredible. And you talked a very, I didn't know this part of your story about what happened with your husband and how he passed away, and that change in your life too. Tell us a little bit about how you have become so resilient in the face of some pretty tough stuff.
Well, that was probably the hardest. My presentation, the garbage truck comes on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I tell people you've got to get mental and emotional garbage out along with physical garbage. Well, that was the hardest piece of emotional garbage I've ever had to get rid of, because Dickie and I didn't have children. And because of that, we were dinks, double income, no kids. And so as a result, we did a lot of travel. We went skiing every year. We went to the beach every year. We traveled to Europe 7 different times. Wow. It was lots of fun. And we went to church together and prayed together. And so he was the total package. He was everything that you would ever want with a mate. And he was a high school track star who ran every single day of his life. And it didn't matter where we were. If we were in Paris, he would leave me in bed asleep early in the morning, and he would go run the streets of Paris, and he'll come back and say, Janie, I found the most wonderful places I've got to take you to see. And it did not matter. Winter, spring, summer, fall, he was out running. And so this particular day, he came in from work, said he had a great day, and he was going for his run. And he put on that skimpy little jogging suit and started out, and dropped dead of a heart attack while he was running. And so I went from being a happily married woman 1 minute to burying a husband and becoming a widow, in a day's time. It was quite a shocker. And that was the hardest piece of garbage I've ever had to get rid of, because I was all alone. And you're really not all alone. You've got, if you're a Christian, you've got the Holy Spirit and you've got angels watching over you. But it's not the same. You can't touch angels and you don't always feel the Holy Spirit. And so when I would and I'd go to church and people would try to be nice to you and love on you and make you feel included. And so many friends started inviting me to their homes to be a part of their families. But I live in Madison, Mississippi, and I'm not kin to a soul. So I would come home at night and just bawl and bawl and bawl. And the way that I already had this presentation, Normal is Gone and It Won't Be Back. That presentation was already popular. I'd already done a DVD of it. And I was laying in bed, and that's a wonderful place to think sometimes before you go to sleep. And I was just crying out to God, telling him, why did you leave me down here all alone? And some of the things that I teach in the Normal is Gone and It Won't Be Back presentation are the things that help me get through it. I thought to myself, well, find a positive way to look at this. And my story, I did, because I decided that because I didn't have children and I didn't have aging relatives, I could actually be free. And Dickie left me, thanks to the good blessings of the Lord, freedom to go and do and travel. And once I started doing that, and there's so many other techniques that we can, whenever it comes to embracing change, we can get busy and get your mind off of it, throw your mind into other activities. And so that's what I did. I started volunteering to go on mission trips and volunteering to do different things in my church and community, and started inviting people over. And that was really hard because Dickie and I did that a lot together. And he would set the table and he would help cook the meats and stuff like that. And now then I was doing it all by myself. So that was hard at first, but it got me still bringing people into my home and still going through some things that were normal to me. But in all of doing it, normal was gone. I was now a widow, and I didn't like that term. I never thought I'd have it. And so I started saying that I was a single lady, and I'm single again. Yes, indeed. And it's okay.
Oh, yeah. You think about C.S. Lewis even wrote a book about how grief affected him so hard. So I think, if C.S. Lewis shakes his fist at the sky, you got to figure that, it's a hard journey to make it through. But like you said, you were able to reframe your situation and be able to find joy in day-to-day living. And that is such an important message for what we're going through right now, because I think everybody has lost something right now. It could be a job. It could be a loved one. It can be a friend. It could be, somebody that they're friends with because they don't agree politically. I mean, it's just everybody seems to be on edge right now. So I think your advice is pretty important right now.
Well, I thank you. I thank you. I have been contacted by 2 groups recently, and I'm working on a new presentation for times like this, and it's called Just Keep Going.
Yeah.
That's what I had to some mornings get up and say, Janie, just breathe. Yeah. That's all you have to do is just get up, get dressed, and breathe. And as you just keep going, you can plow through a lot of the negatives, and you'll find that there's good things on the other side of them if you just won't stop in the middle of them.
Yeah. Was it Churchill that said, if you're going through hell, don't stop? And I think
right.
I think that's pretty accurate there. But I mean, laughter is a big part of what you do. And it's, like you said, you don't consider yourself a comedian, but you're very funny. And that, it's fun to hear you speak. And you also do acting. Tell us a little bit about that too. And how does that help you be a better public speaker when you do acting?
Well, how much time do we have? I love acting. I actually love it. Well, good. I told you that I've started in high school, and we wrote the play, and then I was on stage, and I absolutely loved it. And so in college, I didn't stop. I was taking voice lessons, and we had some musicals. And so I played the Wicked Witch in some of one of the musicals, and that I had to wear this wonderful costume and put on this makeup, and I just absolutely adored it. But I didn't major in theater in college. I just took a few classes, but I did get asked to teach drama classes at the high school. When I first got there, the second or third year I was teaching, I had a drama class. And so I had to learn about drama. Mm-hmm. But I was able to participate in Gulfport Little Theater and the opera company on on the Gulf Coast. And I can't tell you, I had so many fun roles. One of my favorite stories about my acting career, as it were, was there was one year with the Gulf Coast Opera Association. I was asked to play the part of Maria in The Sound of Music, the hills are alive, that sort of thing. And that was just a wonderful, delightful show. But the very next year at Gulfport Little Theater, I got to play the part of Aldonza in The Man of La Mancha. I know when I'm nothing, I'm only Aldonza, the whore. I mean, it was just to go from being a nun one minute and being a lady of the night the next. Oh, it was so much fun. Theater gives you an opportunity to be somebody that you're not. And it also teaches you how to project to the back of the audience. That's one of my frustrations with modern speakers. They expect a microphone to do all the work for them, but mics don't do all the work. Mics don't put the P's and T's and K's and D's and INGs on the ends of words for you. And so when you mumble through your speech, even a mic will only magnify so much. And so that's an aggravation. And they have no animation about themselves. There's no energy in their performance, but you can't stand on the stage without some kind of an energy. Whether you're angry or sad or whatever it is, it needs to come across to the back row of an auditorium. And so in that regard, theater is a perfect training ground for public speaking. It gets you to speak up. And there's a concept that I throw into a few of my speeches. It's real big. It's the last main point that I make in my speech. The garbage truck comes on Tuesdays and Fridays. And it says, practice the magic of acting as if. Now, that is strictly a theatrical term. And what it means by that, sometimes you will rehearse a play, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, for day after day and weekend after weekend. And then you start the run of the show and you're all excited for opening night and everybody's on their best behavior and they get out and the enthusiasm is high. But after the show runs for an entire week and then the next week, and you've already rehearsed this thing, you lose some of the sharpness of it. You lose some of the enthusiasm for it. And if you're not careful, if you don't keep pushing up from the inside, you'll get flat. And then the last audience to see the performance, they're not seeing the same show that the first audience saw. And that's just not fair. They paid the same price, so they need the same show. So we teach actors and actresses that you've got to practice the magic of acting as if it's the first time you've ever done it. And I translate that into all areas, like teachers. Like I taught public speaking for 29 years, and I taught it 4 and 5 classes a day. And so we're talking about hundreds of times you would say the same material. But it didn't matter how many times you had to say it. This class was hearing it for the first time. And so you had to act as though if it's the first time you've ever said it, and you have to be just as excited about it. So that's I also go with these marriages. Sometimes people's marriages are just, they've lackluster. They're taking each other for granted. And so I encourage them to pretend that it's the first time they ever saw them and the first time they ever kissed them. Do you remember the electricity? The first time you ever kissed your wife? Well, go back and find that magic of the first time and keep it alive in your marriage. And I say the same thing with your children. You love them. You're excited when they're born, but gosh, when they become teenagers and are giving you all kinds of problems, you were just saying, Lord, what did I want with this third kid? But you have to go back and imagine that first time you held them and the first time you saw their face and the first time you touched them. And we've got to keep, even when they become teenagers and aren't the best at obeying, just like this dog is squirming in my lap, you have to imagine the first time you saw them and how much you loved them then and continue to create that. Have I gone on too long about that?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. It's wonderful. It's so much truth to that. And, it is funny. With the pandemic, I haven't spoken as much lately. And frankly, hopefully we'll get back and we're starting to do, things are opening up again and that's wonderful. But there'll come a point where I'll sit there and I'll do and I mix stuff up, but there'll come a point where I'm like, I really don't ever want to hear myself say that again. And so I take that out and I retire, I put it in like a little place and retire it. And I come up with new material. Are you constantly writing material when you're out speaking, or do you just every once in a while just get an epiphany and just sit down and write new material? How does that work for you?
Well, I try to come up with a new presentation every year. I have a long list already. I have over 27 presentations. Now I've got 21 on the list you have. And then I speak to churches and women's groups and conferences, Christian conferences and things. So I have some speeches that aren't on this list that are strictly for the Christian community. And, but every year I try to come up with something new. Like last year, I think I came up with the hashtag. You can look on your list and say, are we going to call it a pound or a hashtag, a pound sign or a hashtag sign? And the year before that, I came up with the one about, I've got to see the title, Cool Antacids for a Hot Tamale World. And that's when we were having the election and everybody, the person next to you in the workforce might be Republican and the one next to them might be Democrat, and then there's some libertarian in the middle, and there's so much. So every year I try to look at what's going on in my world and write a presentation to address it. And this year I told you I'm going, just keep going. Just, don't give up in the middle of this pandemic. We're going to get through this. Don't give up in the middle of being stuck at home. We're going to get through this. And so anyway, that's for this year. Now, I will tell you, I do have some like you that I put on the back burner. I told you my very first presentation was Humor for Life, which is, that double meaning. It's humor for your life as well as it's humor for the life of the public and the workforce. And that was my first one. And I gave it at a Rotary Club, and everybody there had a club that they wanted me to go to. And then I went to the Civitan Club, and everybody there and I was just doing that presentation, and schools wanted to hear it for their teachers. And I gave it so many times that I've got it buried on the bottom of my list.
Yeah.
And last year, somebody asked for that presentation, and I almost told them no. I thought, I need to take this off. I'm so tired. But let me tell you the miracle, the wonderful thing that happened. So I dug that presentation back up. I had not given it in 7 or 8 years. I dug it back out and I started looking over it, and I said, Janie, there's some good material in this. You really had a great speech in this. And so I got it out. I updated it a little. I added a few fresh jokes, and I want you to know that was a powerful presentation. And so if somebody asked for it, it's ready to go.
Well, it'd be kind of like Paul McCartney singing a Beatles song. He's done it for quite a few years now, but it's still genius. That's the thing.
It is.
Yesterday is still a wonderful song, no matter how many million, but I know but that's kind of cool. I'm glad to see that you could breathe new life into that. Tell us a little bit about, because you've touched on a lot of the groups, but tell us about some of the places that you've been able to go speak at. Because I know that's one of the fun things about having a speaking career is being able to travel and get to go meet new people and see new places.
Oh gosh, yes, indeed. And I have been blessed. I've spoken more than 1,000 times in 47 different states and in 3 different countries. And wow. So I've been blessed with a wonderful career. That's nothing. Some people have spoken thousands of times in 50. We know a gentleman who's spoken in 50 different countries. So I certainly am not bragging. I'm just saying God's been good to me. And I've had all kinds of wonderful experiences. One of my favorite experiences is one of my most complicated experiences because it was in New York, and I was speaking to the Air Force Research Lab. That's where I was invited to speak, and I was doing an all-day presentation, and everybody in my audience had a doctorate or 2 in physics or mathematics or chemistry or something. This is the Air Force Research Laboratory. Yeah. And whenever you walk into their building and you go down, you see all of these patents that they have been able to discover. Now, a lot of them had to do with Air Force stuff, but the only one I recognized, the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York, invented the CD. Did you know that?
No, did not.
Compact disc. Yeah. That's the only one I recognize on a wall full of them. But this is what made that one so wonderful to me. So I'm a Christian, and I don't mind telling it. Every time I get on a platform, I pretty much mention God or Jesus or the Bible or the Holy Spirit or going to church or something, just to give the Holy Spirit a nugget to work with if he wants to. But this particular speech, I almost said no to, because there was an atheist on the platform of the people on the committee that was picking the speakers, and she had seen my video, and I'm up front, so even in my video I talk about Jesus. And so she said, well, she can come, but she must sign a contract saying she won't say anything religious. And I thought, well, I don't know if I can do that, but I'd done that once before and I felt bad about it afterwards. And so I'll tell you that story if you ever want to hear it. But so I went ahead and said yes, that I would come under those conditions. And I went, and I want you to know all those smart people were just wonderful. They laughed at all my jokes. They participated in all my activities. They stayed the whole day. They weren't running back and forth to their offices. And I could hardly take a break. I was faithful to my word. I did not say a word about church or Jesus or God or the Bible. I didn't quote a scripture. I didn't do anything. But during my break, somebody would come up and say, you seem so wise. My wife and I are having trouble. And can you give me some tips as to what I might be able to? And I would be able to say, well, are you a Christian? Do you go to church? Do you know Jesus? Have you prayed about it? And somebody else would come up and say something. Two ladies came up to me toward the afternoon break, and they were crying and hugging, and they'd say, oh, Janie, you just won't know what you've done for us. We haven't spoken to each other for years. And all of a sudden we just felt forgiveness come all over us. And I said, do you know Jesus? Do you love the Lord? I mean, are you following this? I had opportunities to witness face to face with 5 different people with different types of issues. And it was all because I was told not to talk about Jesus. So that will stay at the top of my list, at the miracles that God can work if you'll just let him. And that's just one of them. I've had all kinds of fun experiences. Some of the ones that I remember most are the ones that I got corrected in. I'll never forget the very first time I was going to mention something about Steve Jobs. And this was years ago at the beginning. And I was trying, it was a goal setting type presentation, time management goal setting thing. And I had found some information about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and how they started in a garage and worked and started at nothing. And so I was up on the platform and I called in Steve Jobs. You know, when you read, it doesn't tell you how to pronounce their names. And from the audience, somebody sitting on the front row said, Miss Walters, that's Jobs. It's Steve Jobs. And I thought, oh, so I was corrected from the platform right away. And another time I was telling a joke about a gentleman, an Asian guy, who was sitting at a major table, a dining table, but I called him an Oriental man. Yeah. And one lady came up and she said, I just feel like I have to tell you something. Rugs are Oriental and vases are Oriental, but people are Asian. And so, I mean, I just love the times that they can correct you, and that, you know, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm about to say, how do you handle hecklers, or do you ever have hecklers? Because I mean, everyone, you know, I've actually spoken to groups where they intentionally heckle you, which is kind of fun. Because for me, being a former 7th grader, I mean, I enjoy that kind of thing. But have you ever had that situation where people have been openly hostile?
Not a lot, but
I have to say, I can't imagine people.
As a matter of fact, no, nobody except the one. Except the one time I agreed to speak at a high school, and I will never do that again, because they never hushed. But as a school teacher, I did not allow students to talk when somebody else was talking. And so when a student was up speaking, nobody could say a word and that sort of thing. And when I'm up speaking, they couldn't say a word unless they raised their hand and got permission. I mean, as much fun as I like to have, I was pretty strict in the classroom. And so when I get into an audience and there are people who are talking, and they're talking loud enough that I can hear them up on the platform, you see that vein right there on my neck? I mean, it pops out, and I ignore them for a while, but I have been known to stop speaking. And I said, and say things like, there are a couple of ladies sitting over on the 4th row who have something very important to tell, because they're talking loud enough for all of us some of us to hear, but not everybody. So ladies, if you will, stand up and just tell us all what's so important. And needless to say, there's snickers and hoo-hoos and whispers, and sometimes they huff off, but I try not to do that because sometimes it causes more commotion than, but so I have had if you call that heckling, I've been the heckler.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That
To
works.
get
No, and I have to admit, I kind of find that fun, but that's just how I'm wired on that as well. Tell a little bit. I mean,
yeah.
because there's people watching this right now that might have to give a presentation at work, or they might have to do something at church, or might have to go do it in a club they're in and get up in front of people, which, like I mentioned before, apparently 3 out of 4 Americans are terrified of it. What's some advice that you would give for somebody who needs to do some speaking and how to get past that initial terror?
Oh gosh, that's a wonderful question. And that's what I taught for 29 years. And the first thing I ever had to teach my classes was how to overcome stage fright. And that's really just the fear of getting up there. And so there's all kinds of techniques. First of all, you've got to breathe because when we get nervous and scared, we take short, shallow breaths. And by doing that, you don't get your lungs filled with enough oxygen to give your hands the oxygen to work and give your brain the oxygen to think. And so you wind up stumbling and fumbling and your hands shake and your knees shake. So I tell people to breathe. And another thing, when you get excited and nervous, you tend to produce a lot of adrenaline. Yeah. And adrenaline is something that gears you for fight or flight. You either get to run really fast or fight really hard. But the problem with public speaking is you have to walk calmly to a platform and stand there and do nothing physically. And so I encourage people, if you're really nervous, before you walk up, do some isometric exercises, push your arms, pull your arms, tighten your stomach, do some stretches, do whatever you can to use up some of that adrenaline. And then after you've taken some deep breaths and used your adrenaline, you are to focus on your material and not on your fear. Don't sit around thinking about how nervous you are, because the more you think about it, the more nervous you'll become. So focus your brain, make it stay with your material. What are you going to say? And then care about your audience. I mean, actually, if you're talking about something that doesn't matter to the audience, you know what my recommendation is? Refuse to talk. Don't waste their time. But make sure that you believe that the things that you're going to communicate are really important to them. And then don't worry about yourself. Be concerned about getting it over to them so that they can use that information. And of course, I always required my students, just to make sure they'd get in the habit of doing it, I required them to have either a visual aid, something that their hands could do, or I required them to have some platform movement so they could use up some of the adrenaline. Sometimes I required them to read for a document or a piece of a document in the middle of their presentation, or to tell a joke, just to keep variety going in their presentations so that they're not always dependent upon standing in one place and just producing words. And because I have always included lots of audience interaction, I would teach my students to do the very same thing. Stop and ask the audience a question. Ask the audience to do something. And the beautiful thing about that is, while the audience is responding, you don't have to do a thing. The pressure is off of you, and people are watching the people who are answering your questions. And so those are just some of the things. And of course, I encourage people to speak as often as you can. Practice really does make perfect. The more you do it, the easier it'll become.
When you're speaking to no, that was a great answer. I mean, like I said, when you're speaking, and I've, like I said, you can speak to 4 people, and it can be as tough sometimes to speak to 4 people as it can to be 1,000 people, because you're looking down at each and every one of those 4 people, and you're reading and seeing how they're reacting. If you're in a room full of 1,000 people, you're not really focused on one person. You're just kind of scanning the room a little bit. Which one do you find to be more challenging, speaking to a small group or to a giant audience?
To me, it's the same. It's about the same. It's according to who that small group is. Like Monday, I was required to speak to my colleagues, people who are as good as I am, if not better than I am. And I was going to open myself up to criticism because that's what we do. We look for things that we can tell our colleagues how they can improve. And so that was nerve-wracking. I was really concerned, and you didn't mention it. Nobody mentioned it, but I could tell I was a little less confident in my first minute of speaking than I was once I got started. Once I settled in and thought, Janie, just give it to them, then it was okay. I have spoken to as many as 2,000. I think that was my largest audience so far. And that's wonderful because you can't see anybody. Now, I do tell people, and I teach my students this, that even though you cannot see their eyes, you look in that area as though, you look in that area as though you can see their eyes. I've had people tell me that I looked right at them and they were in the back of the room. I didn't look straight at them, but they thought I did because I looked in their direction and sustained a look long enough that they thought I had found him. Just a minute, Venice is acting up. Come here, baby. I gave you a treat. What is the deal? Do you want another one? Gosh. Now, you might wonder why I don't spank her, but she's 12 years old.
She's 12 years old. She's got you trained at this point. So, I mean, I understand.
I know, absolutely. There's absolutely nothing I can do at this point. And so I just pick her up and love her. Sometimes I throw her outside, but they bark so loud you can hear it there too. So. Okay, so where were we?
No, I think the biggest challenge, I mean, one time I gave a high school graduation in the Mississippi Coliseum, and that room, trying to fill that room up, I mean, I have a lot more respect for, I remember seeing Billy Joel up in Memphis and in the FedEx Forum, and he made that room seem like it was an intimate, event with maybe 5 or 6 people. There is just a real gift to be able to sit there and fill a room up there with, and like I said, I've seen you speak in a couple different venues, and, I saw you speak the other day on Monday, and of course it was a small room, but you filled the room up. I mean, you projected and so forth like that. It's a real art to be able to do that. But it sounds like to me, the best way to really become a good speaker is just practice and keep doing it. And it sounds like the way to become a speaker is to get fairly good at it. Try to get invited to a small group, and then there'll be 5 people in the audience that want you to speak to their groups. And then 5 more people want you to speak to their group. And it kind of grows exponentially from there.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happens. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, definitely on that. Let me ask you this. Like you said, you do speaking, but you also do corporate training. And I mean, I know that's very close to the same thing because you're still presenting on that and you're presenting information on that. Just kind of looking back over the years, what are some of the things that corporations really want from a trainer or from a speaker? What are some of the things that they really feel like they need to get from you?
Well, my 2 most popular presentations with corporations have been my public speaking. That one's they call it a brief, but it feels like an eternity. And so I teach them how to just make their reports in front of committees and stuff like that, so that that's easier for them. And many times that will just be 4 or 5 executives sitting there, or sometimes it's a whole room full. But in those, many times those are 2 days long. And so once I teach them about stage fright, then I will have them get up and do something, and then we'll talk about which technique works the best. And then I'll teach them about choosing main points, and we'll get a topic and I'll have them select main points. And I said, is this really a main point, or is this just an extenuation of your first point? And we'll talk about how to find your information. And then in these 2 days, when I have them write a speech, and then the second day they're giving the speech and we're videotaping it and we're going back over and studying it. And, so it's really a training and not just a motivational speech about speaking. Also, my writing workshop, I've written 2 books. I've actually written 3, but one's out of print. I've written 2 books. And so because of that, I get asked to teach writing workshops, which I love. And those are the same things. We go in, I have them submit to me some of their writing. And then during the course of, I don't ever say anything bad about anybody's writing, but I have them submit to me things that they have written. And I look at them and I find run-on sentences, or I find the use of that too much, or I find perhaps verbs that don't necessarily fit the noun. And so I will put together presentations for them saying, now these are some problems that we all have, and teach and train like that. Then if it's a 2-day workshop, which it sometimes is, I will have them write, but I'll teach them an organization pattern. And it's much like public speaking. You tell the reader what the content is about, and then you tell them the content, and then you summarize it. And throughout the content, you're forever giving facts and figures and quotations, as well as a piece of humor and a personal story. And anyway, so those are the two big ones.
Yeah.
My stress management has been an all-day workshop for many of my conferences and corporate clients. And that's just simply, they're all stressed out, they're quitting, they're having their heart attacks and things. And so I come in with stress management and tell them how to handle some of the stress and give them some. And that's the blow a bubble, not a gasket. So
yeah,
those
I was
are
about to
some
say
of the
we're in the middle of the great resignation right now, where everybody seems to be walking away from jobs just for that reason. It's like the combination of the stress that's gone on and the fact that maybe they realize that, oh no, maybe there's a little bit more to life a little bit, and just going on that blowing a bubble instead of a gasket. What advice would you give people right now? I mean, literally, maybe they get on Facebook and they just want to scream at everybody, and they're yelling at their dog for barking, and that sort of thing. Not that you would do that, no. I mean, but I would do that to Pip if she were barking right now, I'm sure. But I mean, what advice would you give people right now to be able to kind of chill and to be able to get through the stress that everybody's under?
um, I tell people in that stress management workshop to have themselves a foxhole. You know what a foxhole is in war?
Yeah.
It's a place that you dig in so that the shrapnel and the bullets can't hit you. Well, everybody needs a foxhole, a place that you can get away from the stress. Sometimes for men, it's getting a fishing pole and going out and, and putting a line in the water. They may not even have a bait on the end of the line. Just sitting there and watching the cork bobble or something can be their foxhole. One lady told me that her child went off to college, and so she turned her bedroom into a foxhole for her. She got a comfortable chair, a good reading light. She got some good music going, some candles. And when things are rough, she just goes in there and sits. Mine is my bathtub, my jacuzzi. I would come in off the road just stressed to the max, and really didn't want to talk to anybody or be around anybody. And I would run the hot tub and get the jacuzzi going and get those. I'd set some candles around and I'd get some music playing. And when I came out, all those frayed nerves would be calm. And so everybody needs a place to turn it off. And the problem with working at home is that you work here, you cook here, you take care of kids here, you sleep here, you get up, and you've got to have another foxhole somewhere that you can get away from all of it. That's a big one in stress management.
Boy, hadn't that been the truth?
Another one.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic, it's like you can work 17 hours a day and never get up out of your chair, just because it's so easy to do that now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exercise is great when there's all kinds of stress. And so I encourage people to find an activity that gets them moving, whether it's getting some friends in the neighborhood to go walking with them, or get a tennis partner, or go play, cricket or something, or piccolo, or, whatever you do, to find some activity that you can move your body in, because that burns up some of the stress hormones that are there. Laughter is great. Watching funny movies, or just getting with people. One of my best things is to get with fun people over a meal and just sit there and laugh and talk, and not talk shop, but just talk life. And those types of things are good.
Well, as we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't touched on? Because I mean, I feel like you've covered a lot of great territory, but I want to make sure that we get it all in on this interview. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time today to visit with me. This has been really fun.
Oh, thanks, Marshall. Well, I've had fun. If you don't mind, I'd like to tell your viewers one more thing. I told you that I started public speaking in 1984, and there was a reason why I started that. You see, Dickie and I were sitting at the commissioning ceremony for Southern Baptist missionaries. Mm-hmm. And I was really sort of ticked at God at the time, because I've been a Christian since I was 8 years old, and I've been faithful to his church all those years. And then I had ovarian cancer. And as a result, Dickie and I couldn't have children. And so I just come out of that surgery and just gotten healthy enough to go to this this meeting, and I was still just a little ticked with God that that's the way he was going to play my part. And when they started commissioning those missionaries, I heard the voice of God in my head. Now, I wasn't hallucinating and I wasn't on drugs. I actually heard an audible voice, and this is what he said. When I'm quiet, I can still hear it in my head. He said, Janie, I didn't call you just to teach speech. I called you to speak. Now, that's all he said. And that's why I thought, well, gosh, that was God, but I don't know anybody who speaks for a living. And so I said, well, Lord, if anybody ever asks me to speak, I'll say yes. And within 2 weeks, the phone started ringing. I don't mark it. The phone started ringing and I said yes. And when I said yes to that group, that's when others saw me and I had to say yes to their groups. And that's the way my business has grown. And I just want to encourage people, if there's a desire in your heart to speak or to write or to act or to start a career of any description, if you will just make Jesus the Lord of your life and really and truly dedicate your whole existence to him, pray and seek his will, he won't necessarily take you to the jungles of Africa. He will take you to the heights of your careers that you've never even imagined if you will just give him a chance to lead you. And that's what I've done. And if I have any success, it all goes to the Lord.
Janie,
I hope you don't mind me saying that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Janie, how can folks find you?
I have a website just by my name, JanieWalters.com. You can find information there. You can go to any bookstore and buy my books, and they'll pull them up, Janie Walters. If you cannot, I have an email address, joyfullyjanie@AOL.com. Or you can call Marshall. Marshall knows how to get a hold of me.
I've loved this. Thank you so much for taking the time today. It's always good to visit with you, and look forward to crossing paths back out on the trail again with you soon.
Oh, thanks, Marshall. It's been a blast. I enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of Mississippi Stories. Make sure to subscribe to the Mississippi Today YouTube channel and click the bell to be notified every time a new video uploads.